The house was quiet in the way that only houses with newborns ever truly are. A silence that isn't peaceful, but watchful. A silence that listens for breath. Lara lay on her side in the pale blue dark of the bedroom, her eyes open, her body exhausted in a way that had no name before motherhood. Noah was pressed against her chest, his small back rising and falling beneath her palm, his nose tucked into the soft hollow just below her collarbone. He had migrated there again sometime after midnight, the way he always did. A slow, unconscious drift across the mattress until he found her warmth, her heartbeat, the particular geography of her body that seemed to mean something only he could understand. She hadn't planned for this. She hadn't planned for any of it. Not really. Not the way exhaustion could feel like weather. Something you lived inside of rather than something that passed through you. Not the way her whole sense of self had quietly rearranged itself around this tiny, demanding, utterly miraculous person. She hadn't planned to co-sleep. She had read the books, bought the bassinet, assembled the white wooden crib with its perfectly fitted organic cotton sheet. She had plans. She had a system. Noah had his own ideas. She remembered the first night he had found his way to her side. Truly found his way. Not just because she had pulled him close in desperation, but because he had moved toward her while she slept, as if pulled by some invisible current. She had woken to the weight of him against her ribs and felt something complicated bloom in her chest. Guilt, relief, wonder, love so vast it scared her a little. She had lain there for a long time, afraid to move, watching the ceiling lighten from black to gray while Noah slept on, undisturbed and certain, pressed into her like a sentence finishing itself. She had called her mother the next morning, whispering into the phone in the kitchen while Noah slept in the swing. She had used words like co-sleeping and sleep training and attachment, and her mother had listened quietly, and then said very gently, "He just wants to know you're there. That's all. He just learned that the world exists, and you are the part of it he trusts." Lara had cried at the kitchen table. She wasn't sure, even now, whether she had been crying because her mother was right or because the simplicity of it undid her. He just wants to know you're there. Outside the window, the neighborhood was still. March had arrived with a cold that felt apologetic, as if it knew it had overstayed its welcome. Gray mornings, occasional sun, the kind of weather that couldn't quite commit. The streetlight through the curtain threw a soft amber stripe across the wall, and in that stripe, Lara could see the edge of Noah's ear, the curve of his cheek, the impossible smallness of his fingers curled loosely near her shoulder. He was 4 months old today. She hadn't meant to keep track, not to the day, but it turned out that was the kind of thing you couldn't help. 4 months since she had heard his first cry in that bright, chaotic room where her whole life broke open and reorganized itself into a before and an after. 4 months of learning what it meant to be responsible for a person so completely. 4 months of love so acute, it sometimes felt indistinguishable from fear. She moved carefully, slowly, adjusting her weight so she could look at him more fully without disturbing the sleep that had finally come after 3 attempts at settling. His mouth was slightly open. His eyebrows, impossibly defined for someone his age, dark little strokes of intention, were relaxed, softened from whatever dreaming engaged infants in the deep hours. His breath came in the slow, perfect rhythm of total surrender, the kind of sleep that adults spend decades trying to find their way back to. She had been reading things, the way new mothers read things, compulsively, at 2 a.m, the blue light of her phone washing over her face while Noah nursed and her husband slept. She had read about contact naps and proximity seeking and co-regulation, about the way infant nervous systems are not yet capable of self-soothing, about the way the presence of a caregiver literally changes the biochemical landscape of a baby's brain. She had read about oxytocin and cortisol and the architecture of trust. She had read studies and blog posts and books with titles that promised to unlock the mysteries of baby sleep, and she had come away from all of it with more questions than she had started with. And one thing that felt, in the quiet of this room, unmistakably like a fact. He came to her because she was safe. It was not complicated. It was only the oldest thing in the world. There had been a night, maybe 3 weeks ago, when she had been close to breaking. Not close. She had been at the edge, looking over. Noah had cried for 2 hours without stopping, and she had tried everything. Nursing, rocking, the white noise machine, the bouncing walk around the living room that sometimes worked, the specific sway that his pediatrician had demonstrated at the 6-week visit. Nothing. He had cried, and cried, with the particular desperation of a creature who cannot articulate what is wrong, and cannot be reasoned with, and cannot understand that the person holding him is also, quietly, falling apart. Marcus had taken him for 30 minutes, so Lara could sit on the bathroom floor and cry. She had sat there with her back against the cold tub and her forehead on her knees, and cried the way she hadn't cried since she was a child herself, without self-consciousness, without calculation, with her whole body. She had thought, I am not built for this. She had thought, I love him so much it is destroying me. She had thought, how do people do this? How has anyone ever done this? How does the species survive? And then Marcus had knocked on the bathroom door and said quietly that Noah had stopped crying. He had carried him in, this flushed, exhausted, finally silent baby, and placed him in Lara's arms on the bathroom floor. And Noah had looked up at her with his dark eyes, still wet, still luminous with the residue of crying, and made a sound that was almost, nearly, possibly a sound of recognition. There you are, that sound said, or perhaps she was translating too freely. There is the person, there is the one. She had held him against her chest on the cold bathroom floor and felt the crying drain out of her like water, replaced by something she still didn't have the right word for. Not peace, exactly. Not happiness. Something more primal than either. The simple, annihilating fact of being needed by someone so completely that the need itself became a kind of gift. Now, in the quiet of 4 months on, she thought about what he was saying when he found his way to her in the night. She had read enough to have the clinical language for it, but the clinical language felt insufficient in the blue dark of 2 a.m. With his small hand resting against the fabric of her sleep shirt, his breathing sank to something slower and steadier than waking. He was not failing to learn to be independent. He was learning, first, to be safe. He was learning that when he reached through the dark, there would be something there. A warmth, a heartbeat, a body that recognized his. He was learning that the world, which was very large and very strange and full of textures and sounds and light that he was still sorting into meaning, contained at its center a fixed point, a person who could be found. She was the fixed point. She had not understood, before Noah, how enormous that would be. She had thought love was a feeling. She was discovering that love, at least this kind, was also a location, a place you could be for someone else, reliable as gravity. She had not known she was capable of being that for anyone. Her own mother had been that for her. She understood this now in her body, in a way she had only ever understood it abstractly before. The thousands of times her mother had come, to the bedside, to the kitchen table, to the phone on ordinary Tuesdays. And Lara had taken it as simply the weather of having a mother, unremarkable as air. She wanted to call her again now, in the dark. She wanted to say, I understand. I finally understand what you were doing all those times. I understand the cost of it and why you paid it, and I want you to know that I see it now and I'm sorry it took me this long. Noah stirred. A small sound, not quite waking, and his hand, the one nearest her, opened and closed once, slowly, the way flowers move in time-lapse, as if testing the air. Then he found the fabric of her shirt again, and his fingers curled around it, and he settled back into sleep with a sigh so complete it sounded like relief. She pressed her lips to the top of his head. His hair was still that newborn softness, fine as the idea of hair, and it smelled the way he always smelled, warm and faintly sweet, underpinned by something mineral and ancient, the smell of new life, of the very beginning of things. 4 months ago, she had not known him. 4 months ago, he had not existed in the world she could see, and now she could not imagine the world without him in it. It was one of the stranger facts of motherhood she was discovering, the way it rearranged the architecture of time. The before felt both very close and very distant, like a country you had lived in once and that now seemed to belong to someone else's biography. She remembered herself clearly, her routines and preferences, and the particular texture of her days before him. And yet that self felt like someone she had read about rather than someone she had been. She did not miss it exactly. She hadn't expected that. She had expected to grieve the freedom, the sleep, the uninterrupted hours. She grieved none of it the way she had feared. What she felt instead was something stranger and harder to articulate. The sense that she had been oriented slightly wrong before, like a compass that had been pointing to magnetic north rather than true north, and that Noah's arrival had corrected the error. She was pointed now at something she hadn't known to look for. She thought about the question she had asked herself in those early weeks, when the exhaustion was a living thing, and the doubt was constant. Am I doing this right? She had asked it of her mother, of the pediatrician, of the books, of the internet at 2 a.m. She had measured herself against the standards she found there, and felt perpetually insufficient. She was starting to believe that the question itself was wrong, or not wrong, but incomplete. The better question, the one she was slowly learning to ask, was not am I doing this right, but is he okay? And the answer, on most nights, in the blue dark, with his small, warm weight against her chest, was yes. The answer was the breathing she could feel under her hand, the hand that had found her shirt and held on. The answer was the way he had drifted, unerringly, across the mattress to her side, as if following a signal she broadcast without knowing it. You are safe, that signal said. I have you. This is where the world is steady. She thought she might spend the rest of her life learning to trust that she was enough for him. She thought it might take exactly that long. But here, in this moment, with March quiet outside, and the amber light soft on the wall, and her son's breath against her chest, here, it was possible to believe it. Here, it was possible to think that whatever she was doing, with all its imperfections and improvisations and middle-of-the-night inadequacies, was adding up to something he could feel. She felt him shift again, settling deeper into sleep, and she adjusted her arm around him, curling her body to match his. The old instinct, the oldest one. He would wake in a few hours hungry, and she would be tired again, and the day would begin with its demands and its particular light, and she would love him through it, imperfectly, trying. But right now the house was quiet. Right now he had found her in the dark, and she was here, fixed and warm and present, and he was sleeping like someone who knew at the cellular level that the world could be trusted. She closed her eyes. She thought, I am the place he comes to. She thought, I did not know I could be this. She thought, 4 months. 4 months of learning that love is not only a feeling, it is a place, it is a body, it is a heartbeat that another heartbeat calibrates itself against. Outside, the city breathed its overnight breath, and inside, in the dark, a mother held her son against her chest and felt, for a few minutes more, that the whole long, beautiful, difficult everything of it was worth exactly this.